Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Canadian Passive Investing Show. I'm your host, 𝗖𝗽𝗶 𝗖𝗽, and I'm joined by my co-host, 𝗖𝗪𝗓 Biniaz. We have another great show for you today. Please like and subscribe as it helps us build our channel and allows us to keep bringing you great content and expert guest speakers. Our mission is to empower investors to earn passive income through real estate investing. Today we are joined by Matthew Myers. Matthew Myers is a partner with MW Law, practicing inbound US and outbound global immigration law with a focus on employment and investor immigration. Matthew also serves as the chair of the State Bar of Texas Immigration and Nationality Law Section. He is an active member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association on the Global Migration Section and University Committee. He has been recognized as a top attorney in immigration law by Austin Monthly and by Best Lawyers, ones to watch for immigration law. Wow. So we believe this interview will bring immense value to active investors looking to utilize the EB5 visa to bring on international investors to real estate private equity projects. So thank you for being here, Matthew, and welcome.
Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Matthew, could you please tell us a little bit about your background and what interested you about immigration law in particular?
Well, I wanted to be in an international space within the law. I think I traveled or studied abroad more than anybody in college, and love interacting with different cultures, and have found that especially working with immigrant businesses, it's fascinating some of the ideas and innovation that immigrants bring to the United States. So I found my niche through that, and get to travel occasionally and know a good amount about the immigration systems around the world. So that's how I got into it.
Awesome.
Great.
Now, as the number of the ultra-rich is growing worldwide and many looking to hold a U.S. citizenship, on a high level, can you please describe ways someone with an access to a large amount of capital could apply to immigrate to the U.S.?
So most people have heard about the EB5 immigrant investor if they've heard anything about U.S. immigration. That's the popular visa to talk about. Back when the investment thresholds were $1 million and $500,000, it was called the $1 million visa. But there are other investor visas that are worth exploring in the short term, and perhaps to facilitate a longer term strategy instead of the EB5, because there are some drawbacks with that program. I know that your listeners are more passive investors, so the EB5 has two different pathways to secure an immigrant visa or a green card or permanent residency in the United States. One is a direct investment, starting your own business, managing the business, hiring 10 employees, and making that minimum investment. The other way for passive investors, it's more common, is through a regional center, which is basically an investment vehicle that is set up, approved by US Citizenship and Immigration Services, and allows a larger number of investors to make essentially a passive investment, because they don't have to be there running the day-to-day operations, and they can also benefit from indirect employment. It's most common in the real estate space. There are a number of hotels, including, I found out later, where I had my wedding reception 5 years ago, that it was EB5 Regional Center project. So you'd be surprised.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Great. Yeah, just for me, out of curiosity, years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a immigration consultant, not an immigration attorney, and she told me about a process where if someone was, in overseas, obviously not U.S., Canada, or Europe, potentially a developing country, and they really wanted to get out of that country right away, and work their way to possibly become a U.S. citizen or Canadian citizen, they could actually invest in a country such as St. Kitts and Nevis and receive a passport or citizenship very quickly with the St. Kitts and Nevis passport. Then they could travel to other countries and then start the process for immigration. So this concept of globalization and people wanting to travel, especially people who've done very well economically, and now are looking to possibly, move to the US, to Europe, or Canada. There are creative ways where they could kind of expedite the process and to be able to, make the process go a bit quicker.
It's funny that you mentioned St. Kitts, because that was actually the first direct citizenship program that I assisted a client with obtaining citizenship. The investment thresholds for direct citizenship in St. Kitts and Nevis and 4 other Caribbean countries are around $250,000, compared to other popular direct citizenship by investment programs such as Malta, Cyprus, and Turkey, which are more expensive, but certain clients prefer those countries for various reasons, including access to the EU through Malta, and Turkey is a popular destination for Middle Eastern clients, especially those coming from, I don't think I'm saying a controversial statement, that it's difficult for an Iranian to immigrate to the United States. So obtaining a Turkish passport also creates a qualification for another investor visa category called the E2 Treaty Investor Visa. And what that requires is substantial investment made in the United States. So it requires some more active involvement of the investor than merely just making a passive investment. But that can be to open your own business or buy a franchise or any number of things. And then the 5 Caribbean countries that I mentioned earlier, the country of Grenada is also very popular because that country has an E2 treaty investor visa as well. And kind of an interesting story, I pushed through or helped working with local council in Grenada, a change in the citizenship law down there to allow for a pre-approval process. I had a client that was politically exposed, is the term that they used, and it otherwise would have gone into a black hole and they would never have adjudicated the case, compared to normally 6 months processing time from start to finish of issuance of a passport. And so we got a pre-approval process, which is in existence in other citizenship programs, but hadn't previously been in existence in Grenada.
Cool. Great story.
Yeah.
Great story.
Thank you for sharing that.
Just as you mentioned, our show is more focused on real estate investments and real estate private equity. So we're excited to kind of discuss the EB5. So
yeah, Matthew, if we could please expand on the EB5 visa. Maybe you can tell us, what is the EB5 visa?
Sure. So it's, I think I mentioned this before, but I'll start from the beginning, which is it's a immigrant visa, permanent residency, green card. These are all terms depending on how the process goes, whether it's applied from outside the United States or if the person is already here in the United States in some other immigration status while the case is pending. The 2 ways to obtain EB5 are an individual or direct investment, creation of 10 jobs, and the minimum investments. Right now, there's some controversy with US Citizenship and Immigration Services. They passed a rule that was suspended by a federal judge right before the EB5 Regional Center, which is the other way of obtaining and more popular for passive real estate investments, for obtaining an EB5 immigrant visa. That program, the Regional Center program, doesn't exist right now because the EB5 Regional Center program is not well defined in law. It's part of a omnibus spending bill. It gets grouped with the rest of the government's budget that they will approve, and typically every year, sometimes sooner than that. And they meaning Congress in the United States, did not pass new EB5 Regional Center legislation by the June 30th deadline. And the government agency involved in the process that tried to increase the investment thresholds and make changes to the EB5 program, that rule is also enjoined or suspended by a federal judge. So it's kind of tumultuous situation right now, but there are certainly passive real estate investors getting lined up and ready to as soon as the regional center program opens, as it's anticipated, once Congress gets their act together. We're still getting filings ready under the regional center program.
Got it. Got it. And if you could use one of our projects as a case study of how it works. So we're in the business of buying multifamily assets in the U.S. These assets are institutional assets, so they're 100 units plus. So they range in $20 million plus USD. And our business model is to buy these assets in regions that are showing consistent job growth, population growth, and rent growth and income growth. So then we can go in, do certain renovations on these assets, which we call value add, and force appreciate the asset and eventually sell it 3 to 5 years. The equity needed for these projects, since we're consistently doing these deals, eventually we run out of money. So we partner with investors to bring in the equity needed for these projects. Now, since we're already an international investor located here in Canada, and we're already investing internationally in the US with our Canadian investors and also our US investors, but how would a project as such look like? So let's say we're purchasing a $20 million asset. It's a $8 million equity raise that's needed. A portion of that's for the down payment, a portion is for the capex, for the renovations that are needed. Now we have our own retail investors, accredited investors who are coming on board, but we want to also allow other investors to come on board and invest with us. Talk to us about that process and how it looks, please.
Well, to begin, everything that I'm about to say assumes that we get the EB5 Regional Center program back as anticipated. So we couldn't file it today, but it's not, I don't think, getting into the ins and outs of all of that disputing Congress and delay there. So I'll talk about that process, which would, to start, you would either want to form your own regional center and secure approval from USCIS, the government agency involved in the immigration process, or affiliate with an existing regional center, which effectively lends their existing approval for your project. So I have clients right now that want to have their own regional center approved by USCIS, but the processing times can take around 2 years to get that approval. And so they're wanting to move forward now. And there are these existing regional centers who already have an approval that will, like I said, lend their approval to your project and help with certain aspects of the process, including an annual reporting requirement. So once you have a regional center, or once you've affiliated with the regional center, at that stage, you would want to decide how much you would want to charge your investors as an administrative fee. And I suppose maybe I should talk on the investor side rather than the regional center side. But it's very common for those that affiliate or set up a regional center, those fees can be quite expensive. And so for the benefit of setting this program and this project up for foreign investment, there's usually an administrative fee involved to cover all of the legal fees for that setup, and to pay the regional center and to pay the economists. Economists are involved because the investment thresholds before the program lapsed and when the EB5 modernization rule was in effect, the two investment minimums were $900,000 if it was in a targeted employment area, or 1.8 million per investor if not. And so these, as a practical matter, these EB5 regional center development projects are always in a TEA, so that and set up accordingly. And that's why you bring in the economists and ensure that they're going to be approved as in a TEA area. And also, working with the regional center to draw up the investment documentation, SEC compliance, and all of that. So then that's once you have everything set up, that's when you solicit the investors at the 900,000 threshold, or possibly the 500,000 threshold, depending on what happens with the law. And an immigrant petition is filed with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services on the basis of the investment that's made, with documentation from the regional center showing, which is the brunt of the evidence of the investment. The processing times of that immigrant petition, currently on the USCIS website, they post anywhere from 2.5 years to 4 years in processing time. And it's often much longer, and sometimes immigration attorneys have to sue the government to get them to approve these cases, and they often move the goalpost back. So it's once that approval does issue, though, from USCIS, the U.S. government, the person can apply for a green card if they're in the United States as an adjustment of status, or apply for an immigrant visa through the consulate with jurisdiction over their residence.
Got it. And now currently the EB5 visa as a whole is in front of Congress and being evaluated, or is it a particular section within it, which is that minimum 500,000 or 900,000? Which part is the point of contention currently?
The direct EB5 investment with the investment thresholds of 500,000 and $1 million is what's written into law, and is ongoing, and that's the effectively making an investment that creates or supports 10 U.S. jobs, and is the more traditional starting up a business or buying a franchise, or not really common for passive investments.
That's in effect currently.
That's in effect currently. What the modernization rule did, that USCIS passed or implemented through agency rulemaking outside of Congress, was increase the investment thresholds from 500,000 and $1 million to 900,000 and 1.8 million. But a federal judge in June said that they were not allowed to do that because the acting director of USCIS was not properly appointed by President Trump. It was kind of a creative legal argument. So we reverted back to from June 22nd, when that federal judge issued that injunction, through the expiration of the EB5 Regional Center program on June 30th of this year, that 8-day period, EB5 immigration attorneys were getting flooded with emails wanting to benefit under a $500,000 investment under the Regional Center program. And, generally any lawyer, but you don't want to file something in 8 days. And I was getting calls within the days leading up to that, because these types of cases involve a lot of work. And once a new law passes to reinstate the EB5 Regional Center program, we don't know how the agency or Congress is going to treat it. So rushing to get something on file that could get denied, or could result in some sort of malpractice lawsuit, is just not worth it for the perceived risk. So that's where we stand. To get back to your question, it's the regional center way to obtain an EB5 immigrant visa that's currently not possible. There's some confusion of how USCIS is going to treat those petitions that are approved, that people have submitted their application for a green card based on that approval. If the program doesn't exist, then they have no basis to get a green card. So there are open questions as well for cases that were pending. They've come out and said that they're not going to adjudicate those until they hear, they get clarification whether the program's going to be continued. And of course, they're not accepting new filings right now.
Got it. Great.
Okay.
Now, another question for you. We also speak with a lot of active investors. These are investors which are in Canada, which invest in the U.S. either as the operator themselves or as real estate private equity, and they bring on investors. Now, what is the process? Because even ourselves here at CPI Capital, because our business is only the U.S. We only invest in the U.S. The plan is to at some point apply for U.S. citizenship. What is the process for a group like us? And I've spoken to lawyers, immigration lawyers in the past, and they said the process to come to the U.S. and if you're coming here to get a job and you're possibly taking a job away from a good American, the process is much more difficult than if you're coming to the U.S. to bring money, to create commerce, to create jobs, to be involved in construction. What does a process look like for an investment group like us looking to, since we are doing most of our business in the US, looking to possibly immigrate? What does the process look like for them?
So we've been talking about EB5, which is an immigrant visa, which is permanent residency, but most investors and most employees and workers and professionals that come to the United States, they start in a non-immigrant temporary visa and then later transition to permanent residency through EB5 or another strategy that may be more straightforward. So Canadians have more options than most countries because of the USMCA. Or Canadians call it CUSMA. We like to have our country first in the acronym, and which is the former NAFTA. And so there's a trade NAFTA TN professional visa that is for Canadian professionals that fall under a set list of occupations. And to address you in particular and your listeners, the two likely strategies that an immigration attorney would start with would be again created by the USMCA, but that I mentioned earlier that exists for Grenada and Turkey is the E2 Treaty Investor Visa. And then Canada also has the E1 Treaty Trader Visa, which I've used creatively in the past when you can show trade of goods and services in a substantial amount, which can be professional services. That E1 Treaty Trader for substantial trade between Canada and the United States can be used. E2 Treaty Investor requires a substantial investment, which people from Napoleonic or civil code countries like in Latin America and Europe don't like because they want a specific amount. But through making a substantial investment in the United States that creates some sort of business. So if you started a business as the general partner or a manager of a manager managed LLC that has a number of investments underneath its umbrella, and you're engaging in the active management of that business, then you could come to the United States as the principal investor in that business that you start, or have managers, executives, or essential skills employees work for that company. So it could be more of an operation than just you. As there is an element where they want to see hiring of U.S. workers. The investment can't be marginal, which means it's generally defined as it's defined as supporting more than just you and your family, or you as the investor. And so that's shown by supporting one U.S. worker. But the more foreign workers, as a general rule, the more U.S. workers you want to see involved in the business. But I'm here in San Antonio, and I didn't represent them, but Toyota opened a big plant here. And, I know BMW in the past, to use different examples, and they brought over their Japanese executives and managers and essential employees under the E2 visa. I would be shocked if they didn't use that visa when Toyota opened a plant here. And so that's the more common traditional way. But there are ways of using it in the real estate industry as well.
Got it.
Okay.
So what would be your advice to an active investor who is currently either already investing in U.S. real estate or is looking to invest in real estate, U.S. real estate, and wants to start the process to possibly become a U.S. citizen in near future? What would be your advice to them? Is there any steps they should take, or should they get in touch with a lawyer right away? Please advise.
I would start with the consultation with a business immigration attorney, an immigration attorney that focuses on investor visas or employment, and talk through their ideas, because there may be some tweaks and ways of structuring it that make things easier for from an U.S. immigration perspective, that would not be a problem at the beginning of the process, but become major problems once you have a plan in place and have already started, spending money and getting things set up in a particular direction. So that would be the what I would talk about, or what I would recommend.
Got it.
Okay,
Got it.
right on.
And now our show is also, we hope this is watched internationally, but it seems that every country has a different treaty with the US. So if there's Canadian immigrants or Canadian citizens looking to immigrate to the US, there's different treaties. Similar with the taxation, there is a taxation treaty between Canada and the US that allows for our investors to be relieved from double taxation. So I'm guessing it's the same concept when it comes to immigration as well.
I don't want to talk about tax because I have enough to know in terms of immigration. So I defer the tax portion of that question. But yes, there are, that for the E1 and the E2 treaty, you can Google E treaty countries, and you'll pull up the State Department website that shows which countries have an E1 treaty, which countries have an E2 treaty, and which countries have both. And that's a popular investor visa under the treaties that each of those countries have with the United States. There are 5 countries that have a treaty that creates a professional visa category, which is also considered and utilized for employees of the business. And sometimes investors come in as employees of a business if they don't have a significant ownership percentage, depending on how it's structured. So we may have the brains behind the operation here in the United States as a TN management consultant for various reasons, depending on how the investment's structured.
Got it. Maybe I can ask my last question before Ava gets to her question. But
Sure.
now, if someone is looking to immigrate to the U.S., should they be speaking to a lawyer in their country, or should they be speaking to an immigration lawyer in the U.S.?
For unauthorized practice of law reasons, they want, and also making sure that you get the best possible advice, you're going to want to talk to a qualified, experienced U.S. immigration attorney. And I really do emphasize, make sure that they focus on business immigration, investor immigration, because in my mind, there's really 2 practice areas within immigration. There's the humanitarian, family, removal defense side, and then there's the employment and investor side. And there are U.S. immigration attorneys in many countries worldwide, and there are many great immigration attorneys who live outside the United States. But that would be something that I would make sure that you're consulting with a U.S. attorney.
Great advice.
Right on.
Great advice.
And just from a passive investor perspective, Matthew, I was just wondering, I think there's a 2-year minimum amount of time where the investor or nominee has to keep their investment in a project. Now, I was curious, if the general partner decides to sell the asset before that 2 years, what happens to that investment?
I think this is for the EB5.
This is for the
visa.
EB5, sorry,
But
going back
even
to
though
the
it's in the
EB5.
air right now.
Yeah.
But hypothetically speaking, if it was in place in the old rules, and a GP decides to sell the project and return the capital back to the investors, what is the immigrant to do, or the nominee to do?
So the investment has to be maintained. So I mentioned the the processing times of the immigrant petition showing the investment with USCIS, that can take, according to government processing times, 2.5 to 4 years right now. And I would bet on the longer end of that. Once that's approved, then the person applies for a green card, either within the United States or outside the United States, which also takes often about a year, and then results in the issuance of a 2-year conditional permanent resident card. So it's that 2-year period. The end of that 2-year period is when the investment can be returned or withdrawn. So it's, instead of 2 years, it can be more like 7 years.
Okay.
Or depending on how the process goes.
Okay, so the term of the project should probably be, it'd have to be quite a bit longer
So
than that
probably
5-year hold.
would make a lot of sense for it to be a ground up development project.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Rather than a quick turnaround, fix and flip kind of value add model.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, and we should have you back on when the EB5 finalizes again.
Yeah.
And great to hear what did the lawmakers finally decide on this topic. But great.
That would be really great.
Now on to the next part of our show.
Just having a little bit of fun here. We're going to do the 10 championship rounds to financial freedom. So whatever comes top of mind. It's just I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. So we'll get started here. So number one question: who is the most influential person in your life?
Probably my father. He's an entrepreneur, so.
That's great. Okay, number two. What is the number one book you'd recommend?
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Nice. If you had the opportunity to travel back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Not take yourself too seriously, I guess.
Nice. That's a good one.
He's so young himself. I'm not sure if he goes back in time. He might be in junior high. But okay. Go ahead.
All right. What is the best investment you've ever made?
The engagement ring to my wife.
Nice. Okay. What is the worst investment you've ever made?
I don't know. I don't think about that.
He's never made a bad investment.
He doesn't think about spilled. He doesn't think about spilled milk. Okay.
I guess I bought into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency at the peak. I didn't realize it was the peak, and then it tanked.
It'll come back.
How much would you need in the bank to retire today? What's your number?
Well, I'm relatively young, so that's quite a lot of money. I don't know. I don't have a number.
Light years away. Okay, if you could have dinner with someone dead or alive, who would it be?
Manu Ginobili, my favorite basketball player.
Nice. Awesome. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing now?
I would be an astronaut.
Nice. Book smarts or street smarts?
Street smarts.
Really? Okay.
I already have book smarts.
Last one. If you had $1 million cash and you had to make one investment today, what would it be?
Index funds just index funds.
Oh, us realtor people are like, no, invest in real estate. Don't do it. No, that's fine. That was great. No, awesome. Really appreciate that.
Thanks,
that was great.
Matthew.
So
you're really knowledgeable. We appreciate you coming on and educating us.
And we're probably going to be calling you for immigration needs
Absolutely.
here shortly. So that's going to be very interesting. But yes.
Well, I feel like with everything going on in the law, you could probably see the wheels turning and the silly strings putting everything together. It's like, how much do I really want to go down this road of how convoluted the system is right now?
Yeah, well, we'll bring you back on and we'll go from there.
Yes.
Matthew, can you just let everybody know what is the best way people can reach you?
My email, Matthew@mwfirm.com. It's the best way to get in touch. I'm happy to set up a consultation and talk through what we've talked about today.
Great, and we'll share all your information below the video. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.